The mail-order bride thought no one wanted her, until a little girl whispered, "Can you be my mommy?" Ilara Voss sat near the window of the colony ship and watched the stars slide past like slow, quiet snow. The glass was thick and slightly cloudy from age, and it made space look softer than it really was. That softness matched how she felt inside, tired, careful, and trying not to hope too much. The ship was called the Dawn Petal, a name that sounded gentle and hopeful. But the halls were narrow, the lights were old, and the air always smelled a little like metal and recycled water. People spoke in low voices. Everyone seemed to carry their own private worry, like a small bag they refused to put down. Ilara had been traveling for a long time. Long enough that arrival had started to feel like a story she once heard as a child. She had read the station pamphlets so many times that she could almost recite them. Haven Falls Station, a peaceful orbital colony. Agricultural rings, school dome, habitat corridors. Family support program, family. The word had been the reason she signed up. She was not a soldier, not a scientist, not a pilot. She was a teacher and a caregiver. On Earth, she had worked in small learning centers, helping children who struggled with reading and speaking. She had learned how to be patient, how to notice quiet sadness, how to make someone feel safe with simple words and steady routines. But Earth had become crowded and loud, and she had become invisible there. Rent went up, schools got cut, friends moved away. The nights got longer and the days felt the same. When the Interstellar Family Initiative opened applications for frontier worlds, she applied without telling anyone. At first, it felt brave. Then, when the messages stopped coming, it felt foolish. The initiative was supposed to help colonies grow. Some worlds needed teachers. Some needed medical aids. Some needed people willing to build homes and families in places where the population was low. The program was not only about romance, no matter what people joked about online. It was about connection and stability, about giving remote communities the support they needed. Still, Ilara understood how it looked from the outside. A mail-order bride program, a list, a match. A contract, people liked simple labels. She had tried to keep her expectations small, but each time she checked her private inbox and found nothing new, something inside her went a little quieter. She told herself the reasons could be practical. Maybe her profile did not stand out. Maybe her age was not what people wanted. Maybe there were too many applicants. Maybe she had been assigned as general support instead of a family match. It should not have hurt so much. It was only a system, only forms and databases. But it did hurt because it felt personal even when it was not. On the ship, some passengers received welcome messages before arrival. They smiled at their screens. They talked about where they would live, what meals they would cook, what gardens they would plant. A few even shared pictures of the people waiting for them. Ilara pretended not to notice. She kept her hands folded in her lap. She read old storybooks on a tablet. She helped in the ship's daycare during volunteer hours, because at least children did not look at her like she was a mistake. One evening, the ship's announcement chimed softly through the cabin. "Passengers for Haven Falls Station, please prepare for docking procedures." Arrival in 6 hours. Ilara felt her stomach tighten. 6 hours, after all this time, it was finally real. She stood, smoothed her simple jacket, and checked her suitcase one more time. It was small. She did not own much. A few sets of clothes, a notebook. A tiny photo of her grandmother, a bundle of printed children's lesson cards she had made herself. She also had a folded paper star, made from a snack wrapper by one of the ship's children. It was uneven and silly, and she kept it anyway. She did not know why she kept it. Maybe because it reminded her that someone had once made something just for her. When the docking process began, the ship vibrated gently. Lights blinked in the cabin corners. People gathered their things and lined up in the corridor. Ilara joined the line, holding her suitcase handle with both hands. The hall smelled sharper now, like cold air and machinery waking up. Through the open viewing panels, Haven Falls Station came into sight. It was beautiful in a quiet way. The station was not huge like the old capital hubs. It looked like a flower made of rings and curved arms. Soft white panels caught the starlight. Large windows showed warm interior lights. A thin halo of green from the agricultural ring was visible, like a gentle glow. As the ship moved closer, Ilara noticed small ships docking and leaving like bees around a calm hive. Everything looked organized, peaceful, alive. A crew member guided passengers toward customs and orientation. Ilara followed the flow until she stood in a clean arrival hall. The floor was polished, the ceiling high, and the air smelled fresh like plants. A welcome banner in several languages curved across the far wall. Welcome to HAVNFALL station. Alara stepped forward, trying to keep her face calm. She moved through scanning points, showed her documents, and answered basic questions with a steady voice. A station worker with kind eyes looked at her file and nodded. Ilara Voss, initiative arrival, the worker said. You'll be escorted to orientation. Ilara waited for another sentence. A name, a meet and greet, some clear direction that told her she had been expected in a personal way. But the worker only offered a polite smile and handed her a slim wrist tag. Your guide will meet you at the Family Services desk. Family Services, it sounded hopeful. Ilara breathed in slowly and followed the signs. The Family Services area was warmer than the arrival hall. There were soft seats, a small play corner with bright blocks. A screen showing station announcements. People came and went, some carrying babies, some holding hands, some looking nervous like Ilara. A tall man in a simple station uniform stood near the desk, speaking to a staff member. He had dark hair, a tired posture, and the careful look of someone who did not waste energy. He was not old, but there was something worn around his eyes, like he had not slept properly in a long time. Ilara did not assume he was there for her. She waited at the side, checking her wrist tag again. Her tag showed, assigned intake, general support, pending review, pending review. That was the same kind of empty answer she had gotten for months. Her throat felt tight, so that was it. She had traveled all this way, and still she was pending. She told herself she could still do good work. General support mattered. She could teach, help, assist. She could build a life even if it was not the life she had imagined. But as she stood there, her suitcase suddenly felt heavier. A small sound pulled her attention. Soft footsteps, a tiny cough, a quiet shuffling near her knee. Ilara looked down. A little girl stood beside her, so small she barely reached Ilara's waist. The child wore a simple station sweater and soft shoes. Her hair was dark, cut neatly, and her eyes were large and strange in a way Ilara could not explain at first. There was a gentle shine in the iris like a hint of starlight, not frightening, just different. The child looked up at Ilara with full seriousness, like she was studying her face. Ilara smiled automatically, the way she always did with children. "Hi," she said softly. The girl did not answer right away. Her fingers held the edge of Ilara's sleeve as if she was afraid the sleeve might disappear. Ilara knelt a little to be closer. "Are you lost?" she asked. The girl's lips moved as if forming words she had not used in a long time. Then she whispered very clearly, "Can you be my mommy?" Ilara froze. For a moment she was sure she had misunderstood. The station was busy. Maybe the girl meant something else. Maybe it was a game. Maybe she was asking for help finding her mother. Ilara's mouth opened, but no sound came out. The girl tightened her grip on Ilara's sleeve, not pulling, just holding on. Her eyes did not look playful. They looked careful, hopeful, like she had made a decision and was waiting to see if the world would punish her for it. Ilara swallowed. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "where is your dad or your mom? Who are you here with?" The child glanced toward the tall man in the station uniform. The man turned at the same moment as if he felt the change in the air. His eyes landed on the child first, then on Ilara. He stepped forward quickly but not roughly, stopping a respectful distance away. His face was polite, but alarm was clear in his posture. "Myra," he said, voice low, "what are you doing?" The child, Myra, did not let go of Ilara's sleeve. She kept looking at Ilara as if the answer was the only thing in the room that mattered. The man's gaze moved to Ilara. "I'm sorry," he said. She doesn't usually do this. She doesn't usually talk to strangers." Ilara's heart was beating too fast. She stood slowly, careful not to pull her sleeve away. "It's okay," she said, though she did not feel okay at all. "She asked me a question." The man looked almost startled by that. "She asked you?" He lowered his voice further. "She spoke." Myra nodded once, still staring at Ilara. The man's face shifted, like something inside him cracked open a little. He seemed both shocked and afraid of getting his hopes up. Ilara looked between them. "I'm Ilara," she said softly. The man blinked as if remembering manners. "Commander Wren Calder," he replied, then added quickly, "Station operations. And Myra is my daughter." Ilara did not know what to do with the word daughter right now. Myra's hand on her sleeve felt like a small anchor. Ilara's own life had been floating for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to be held in place. "She asked if you could be her mommy," Calder said, still sounding like he could not believe the sentence. Ilara's cheeks warmed. I didn't expect that, she admitted. Calder looked down at Myra. Myra, that's not something the girl finally looked up at him, and her voice stayed small but steady. I want her, Myra said. A silence spread between them. Even the nearby desk staff seemed to pause, sensing something important. Ilara felt a strange pressure behind her eyes. It was not exactly sadness. It was more like being seen too clearly. She had spent months trying to look useful, trying to look wanted. She had written careful descriptions of herself, listed her skills, her patience, her love for teaching. But none of that had made anyone reach out. And now a child, in one whisper, had reached her more deeply than any system ever had. Calder cleared his throat and his voice softened. Myra, you can't just choose. He stopped, then tried again. Ilara, I'm sorry, we've had changes. My partner passed away some time ago. Myra has been quiet since. She doesn't connect easily. This is unexpected. Ilara nodded slowly. I'm sorry for your loss, she said. The words felt small but sincere. Calder's jaw tightened as if he was holding himself together. Thank you. Myra pressed closer to Ilara, not hiding, just claiming nearness in a simple, fearless way. Ilara looked down at her. Myra, she said gently, that's a very big question you asked. Myra blinked. I know. Ilara almost laughed from surprise. She could not remember the last time she had heard a child sound so certain. Calder's eyes moved between them again, cautious. Are you assigned here as family placement? He asked Ilara. His tone was careful, like he did not want to be rude, but he needed to know. Ilara lifted her wrist tag slightly. The words glowed, general support, pending review. Calder read it, and something like disappointment flickered across his face, quickly hidden. I see. Ilara felt her throat tighten again. The hope that had risen inside her threatened to collapse. Of course, it was not official, it was just a child's wish. But Myra did not seem to care about official tags. She simply looked up at Ilara again and whispered, Please. A staff member at the desk finally stepped closer, trying to be helpful without interrupting too harshly. Commander Calder, the staff member said, if your dependent initiated contact, we may need to log a family services consult. This falls under bonding response protocols. Calder looked startled again. Bonding protocols? The staff member nodded. Some children, especially those with mixed heritage or neuroadaptive traits, form connections differently. Havenfall has guidelines. Ilara's breath caught. Mixed heritage. That explained Myra's eyes, the starlight shine. There was alien DNA somewhere in her line, not something dramatic, just a quiet part of who she was. Calder ran a hand over his face as if trying to wake himself up. Myra, he said, softer now, why did you ask her that? Myra hesitated, then spoke as if it was the simplest truth in the universe. She feels like home. Ilara's hands trembled slightly. She steadied them by resting one on her suitcase handle. Home. She had walked through a banner that said the word, but she had not believed it. Myra said it like she had known it already. Calder looked at Ilara, his expression full of questions he did not know how to ask. Ilara did not know the answers either. She only knew she did not want to hurt this child. She also knew she did not want to run away from the first real warmth that had reached her in a long time. She spoke carefully. Commander Calder, I don't want to confuse her, she said. But I also don't want to ignore what she's feeling. Maybe we can talk. With family services, find a safe way to handle this. Calder exhaled slowly. That sounds reasonable. He paused, then added, almost quietly, I'm not sure I remember what reasonable looks like anymore. The staff member gestured toward a side room with soft lighting and a small table. We can start with a simple consult, they said. No commitments, just conversation. Calder nodded once, then looked down at Myra. Would you come with me? He asked her gently. Myra looked at Ilara instead, like she was waiting for permission. Ilara's chest ached. She gave Myra a small nod. We can go talk, Ilara said, keeping her voice calm and kind. Okay. Myra nodded and finally released Ilara's sleeve, but only to take Ilara's hand. The contact was small and warm and real. Calder noticed, and his eyes widened slightly, then softened. As they walked toward the side room, Ilara felt the station around her change. The lights seemed warmer. The air smelled more like plants. The sounds felt less like noise and more like life. She had arrived thinking she was the last name on a list, a person no one had chosen. But a little girl had looked up at her and asked a question that was not about systems or contracts. It was about belonging. And as Alara stepped into the room with Myra's hand in hers, she realized something she had not let herself believe for a long time. Maybe she was not here to be chosen at all. The small room felt warmer than the rest of the station. The lights were soft, and a plant with wide green leaves sat in the corner, gently moving in the quiet air. Alara sat on one side of the table, Commander Calder on the other. Myra sat between them, swinging her legs and holding the little paper star Alara had pulled from her pocket without thinking. A family services counselor named Lena joined them. She was human, with calm eyes and a voice that sounded like it had learned how to slow the world down. "Thank you for coming in," Lena said gently. "This isn't an official placement meeting, this is just a conversation." Alara nodded. Calder nodded. Myra smiled at Lena, then looked back at Alara like she was making sure she was still there. Lena folded her hands on the table. "Myra, can you tell me why you wanted to talk to Alara?" Myra tilted her head, thinking. "She feels soft inside," she said finally. Alara blinked. Calder let out a quiet breath that sounded almost like a laugh. Lena smiled. "That's a very thoughtful answer." Alara felt heat in her face again. She did not know how a child could see something like that in her. She had always thought of herself as tired, not soft. Lena turned to Alara. "You arrived under general support," she said, "but bonding responses like this aren't uncommon here. Havenfall has many mixed heritage families. Some children sense emotional states differently. They connect to feelings before words." Alara looked at Myra, who was now carefully folding the paper star like she was trying to fix its uneven points. "I don't want to confuse her," Alara said. "I don't want to promise something I can't give." Calder nodded. "That's my fear too," he said quietly. "She's already lost one parent. I don't want her to lose another person she believes in." Myra frowned slightly, like she did not like the direction of the conversation. Lena leaned back in her chair. "This doesn't have to be about promises today. It can be about presence. Sometimes children just need someone to be near them, not someone to become something forever." Alara felt her shoulders relax a little. Lena continued, "We can arrange temporary involvement, shared time, simple activities if both of you agree." Calder hesitated, then looked at Alara. "Would you want that?" he asked. Alara thought about the quiet ship, the empty inbox. The long days that had felt like waiting for something that never came. Then she looked at Myra. "I would like to spend time with her," Alara said honestly. Myra smiled so wide it felt like a small sunrise in the room. Lena nodded. "Then we can start small." That afternoon, Alara was given a simple visitor pass instead of a permanent assignment. Calder invited her to walk back with them to their habitat ring. The corridor curved gently, with windows that showed the slow turn of the stars. Myra skipped between them, holding both of their hands like she had always belonged there. Calder's home was modest. 2 sleeping rooms, a shared living space, a small kitchen with clean surfaces and neatly stacked tools. Everything looked cared for but not decorated. Like a place that was used, not lived in. Myra dropped her shoes at the door and ran to a shelf where a few carved wooden animals stood in a line. She picked one up and showed it to Alara. "I made this," she said. Alara knelt to look closer. The carving was simple but careful. "It's beautiful," she said. Myra looked proud in a quiet way. Calder watched from the doorway, arms crossed loosely, not defensive but unsure where to place himself. Alara stood and smiled at him. "You've made a nice home," she said. Calder shrugged. "It works." There was an awkward pause, then Myra tugged on Alara's hand again. "Story time," she said. Calder blinked. "She hasn't asked for a story in months." Alara's chest felt tight. "I can tell one," she said, "if that's okay." Calder nodded slowly. "Please." They sat on the floor. Myra leaned against Alara's side without asking. Calder sat nearby, pretending to focus on a tablet but clearly listening. Alara told a simple story about a small star that felt too dim to matter, until it learned that its light helped travelers find their way home. She kept the words easy, the pace gentle. Myra listened without moving. Calder stopped pretending not to listen. When the story ended, the room felt quieter than before, like the air itself was thinking. "That was nice," Calder said. Alara smiled. "Thank you." The days that followed were simple, but they felt full. Alara helped Myra with basic lessons in the station's learning dome. She taught her simple earth songs and counting games. Myra showed her how to care for the small plants in the agricultural ring, explaining which leaves were happy and which were tired. Calder watched from a distance most of the time. He did not interrupt. He did not push. But sometimes Alara caught him standing in a doorway, just looking at them like he was trying to memorize something. One evening, Calder finally spoke. They stood near the window in his home, watching Havenfall's star glow softly outside. "I didn't think I'd ever let someone this close again," he said. Alara did not answer right away. She let the silence sit between them. "She lost her other parent when she was very young," Calder continued. "Myra doesn't remember much, but I do. I remember how full this place used to feel." Alara nodded. "It feels fuller now," she said carefully, not claiming, just noticing. Calder looked at her, really looked at her for the first time. "You make it feel that way." The words were not heavy, they were honest. That night, Alara returned to her assigned guest quarters instead of staying. The room was small, but it did not feel empty anymore. She placed the paper star on the table beside her bed. For the first time in a long while, she slept without waking up to check her messages. Days turned into weeks. Myra began to wait by the door at the same time every morning. Calder pretended not to notice, but he always left the door unlocked. Alara's visitor pass kept getting quietly extended. The station staff started smiling at her in a different way. Not like a newcomer, but like someone who belonged. One afternoon, Alara received a message on her wrist tag, "Interstellar Initiative, match update available." Her heart jumped. She sat alone in the learning dome, Myra busy with a puzzle across the room. Alara stared at the message for a long time before opening it. The match was on a core world. Stable, comfortable, everything she had once hoped for, a partner profile full of plans and promises, security, housing, long-term placement. It was the kind of offer people waited years for. Alara closed her eyes. When she looked up, Myra was watching her. "Are you going away?" Myra asked quietly. Alara stood and walked over to her. She knelt down. "I don't know yet," she said honestly. Myra's shoulders dropped a little, but she did not cry. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small carved star made from soft wood. "I made this for you," she said, "so you don't forget." Alara took it with shaking hands. "Forget what?" she asked. Myra smiled, small and sure. "Us." Alara pulled her into a gentle hug before she could stop herself. Myra hugged back without hesitation. From the doorway, Calder watched. He did not look surprised. That night, Alara sat alone with the carved star in one hand and the message glowing in the other. One was a future promised by a system. The other was a future asked for by a child. She did not choose that night. But for the first time in her life, she understood what the choice really meant. And Havenfall Station, quiet and patient, waited with her. Alara woke before the station lights shifted to morning mode. The room was still dim, and the soft hum of Havenfall's systems filled the quiet. The carved wooden star rested on the small table beside her bed. She reached for it without thinking, her fingers wrapping around its smooth edges. She did not know when the star had become something more than a gift. It felt like a promise she had never spoken out loud. She sat up and looked at her wrist tag. The message from the Interstellar Initiative was still there, waiting patiently, like it had all the time in the universe. She did not open it again. Instead, she dressed and stepped into the corridor. The lights glowed pale gold, and a few early workers moved past her with gentle nods. The station felt like it always did, steady, calm, alive in quiet ways. It felt like a place that trusted her to be part of it. Alara walked to Calder's habitat ring without thinking about the path. Her feet already knew it. The door slid open before she could knock. Calder stood there, already dressed for his shift, his expression surprised but not unwelcome. "Morning," he said. "Morning," Alara replied. She hesitated. "I hope I'm not too early." Calder shook his head. "Myra's already up. She's in the kitchen trying to convince the food printer to make star-shaped fruit." Alara smiled despite herself. "Is it working?" "No," Calder said, "but she's very serious about it." Alara stepped inside. The smell of warm tea filled the space. The kitchen light was brighter than the rest of the room, and Myra stood on a small stool, tapping commands into the food printer with careful focus. She turned when she saw Alara. "You came," Myra said, like it was something important. "I did," Alara replied. "I always do." Myra nodded, satisfied. Calder watched the exchange quietly. He poured Alara a cup of tea and handed it to her without asking. She accepted it, and the simple gesture made something warm settle in her chest. They sat together at the small table while Myra worked on her breakfast project. The printer finally produced a rough star shape that looked more like a lopsided flower. Myra accepted it proudly. This one is brave, she said. Alara laughed softly. It looks very brave. For a moment, everything felt easy, then Calder spoke. You got a message, he said, not accusing, just noticing. Alara froze slightly. How did you know? He nodded toward her wrist tag. You keep glancing at it. Alara lowered her hand. Yes, I did. Myra stopped chewing and looked between them. Is it the place that wants to take her away? She asked. Alara and Calder both looked at her. Calder frowned gently. Myra, we don't talk about people being taken away. Myra tilted her head. But she might go. Alara set her cup down. She knelt beside Myra. It's just a message, she said. It's about another place I could work. Do you want to go? Myra asked. Alara hesitated. The honest answer was complicated. I wanted something like that before I came here, she said. But now I don't know. Myra considered this. I want you to stay, she said simply. Calder closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them again. Myra, he said, Alara has a right to choose what's best for her. Myra looked up at him. Is staying with us bad for her? The question hung in the air. Calder did not answer right away. Alara did. No, she said softly. Staying with you is not bad for me. Myra smiled, wide and bright. Calder looked at Alara, something heavy and hopeful in his eyes. You don't owe us anything, he said. I need you to know that. Alara nodded. I do know, that's why it's hard. Later that day, Alara went to the learning dome with Myra. The children were building small models of the station using soft blocks and paper shapes. Myra worked carefully, placing each piece like it mattered. Another child asked, Is Alara your mom? Myra paused. She looked at Alara, then back at the child. Not yet, she said. But she feels like one. The words hit Alara in a way she had not expected. She turned away for a moment, pretending to straighten some supplies. A station teacher named Kess approached her. You've made quite an impact, Kess said. Alara smiled weakly. I didn't mean to. Kess shook her head. The best kind never do. That afternoon, Alara received another message, this one from Family Services. Consult follow-up available. Please visit Office 3B. She almost ignored it. But she went. Lena was waiting for her, calm as always. How are things going? She asked. Alara laughed softly. That depends on what you mean by things. Lena smiled. Fair. Alara sat down. I got a match offer, a good one. Lena nodded. I expected that. Your profile shows strong community bonding, core worlds like that. Alara looked at her hands. Myra asked me not to go. Lena leaned forward slightly. And what do you want? Alara opened her mouth, then closed it again. I want to stay, she admitted, but I'm scared that I'm just reacting to being needed. That I'll hurt them if I change my mind later. Lena nodded. That's a real fear, but staying because you care is not the same as staying because you're trapped. Alara swallowed. What if I become something Myra depends on too much? Lena smiled gently. Children depend on people. That's how they grow. The question is whether the people they depend on are willing to grow too. Alara left the office with more questions than answers. That evening, Haven Falls Station held a small community gathering in the central ring. It wasn't a festival, just a shared meal and quiet music. People brought dishes from different worlds. Soft lights floated above like small stars. Alara, Calder, and Myra sat together at a long table. Myra leaned against Alara's side. Calder sat close enough that their shoulders almost touched. A neighbor told a story about planting the first garden on the station. Someone else shared a song from Earth. Laughter moved through the space like a gentle wave. Alara looked around and felt something she had not felt in years. Belonging. Calder noticed her expression. You okay? He asked. Alara nodded. I think so. He hesitated, then spoke quietly. I don't want to put pressure on you. But I want you to know you've changed this place for us, for me. Alara met his eyes. You've changed it for me too. Myra, listening carefully, raised her head. So you're staying? She asked. Alara did not answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out the wooden star Myra had carved for her. She placed it on the table between them. I don't have a final answer yet, Alara said, but I know something. Myra leaned forward. What? Alara smiled softly. I know this star feels like home to me. Myra's eyes lit up. Calder looked at the star, then at Alara. He took a slow breath. If you choose to stay, he said, we won't take it lightly. We won't treat it like a favor. We'll treat it like a family. The words settled deep in Alara's chest. That night back in her guest room, Alara finally opened the initiative's message again. She read the details slowly. The promises, the plans, the safe, clear future. Then she looked at the wooden star on her table. She imagined a home where laughter echoed in the halls, where a little girl waited by the door, where a man tried to remember how to hope again. She imagined herself in both futures. One felt quiet and steady, the other felt alive. Elara closed the message. She did not delete it. But she did not reply either. Instead, she picked up her tablet and began writing a new message, not to the initiative, but to family services. Request: status change from general support to community family placement. Location: HAVNFALL station. She stared at the words for a long time before pressing send. The wrist tag glowed softly in the dark. Somewhere across the station, Myra slept with the carved star she had kept for herself tucked under her pillow, dreaming of a home that felt big enough for all of them. And for the first time since Elara had boarded the Dawn Petal, she did not feel like she was waiting for her life to begin. The response from family services did not come right away. Elara checked her wrist tag more often than she wanted to admit. Each time it stayed quiet, she felt a small mix of relief and worry. Part of her hoped the message would arrive quickly so she could stop wondering. Another part feared what the answer might be. Life on Havenfall continued as it always did, steady, calm, and full of small moments that felt bigger than they looked. Myra still waited by the door in the mornings. Calder still pretended not to notice. Elara still walked in with a smile and a soft, good morning that Myra treated like something special. One day, Elara helped in the station garden ring. The plants grew in wide, curved rows under warm lights that mimicked a distant sun. Myra ran between the rows, careful not to touch the leaves marked as resting. Calder stood beside Elara, holding a small basket of harvested fruit. "You're good with her," he said. Elara looked at him. "You say that like it's a surprise." Calder smiled slightly. "It is. She doesn't open up easily, but with you she doesn't hesitate." Elara watched Myra crouch beside a plant, whispering to it like it could hear her. "She doesn't hesitate with me either," Elara said softly. "That's what scares me sometimes." Calder frowned. "Why?" "Because I don't want to be another person who leaves," Elara replied. Calder's expression changed. He set the basket down. "You wouldn't be," he said. "Not in the way you think." Elara shook her head. "You can't promise that," Calder sighed. "No, I can't. But I can promise that if you stay, you won't be alone in it." That night, the station council held an open meeting. It was a regular event where residents could talk about needs, ideas, and problems. Elara went with Calder and Myra, sitting near the back. One of the topics was the Interstellar Family Initiative. A woman stood and spoke. "We've had good results," she said, "but some families feel like the system treats them like assignments, not people." Another resident added, "We need more focus on connection, not contracts." Elara felt her heart beat faster. Lena stood up near the side of the room. "Family Services has been working on a new approach," she said. "Something that allows relationships to grow naturally without pressure from placement timelines." Murmurs moved through the crowd. Calder glanced at Elara. "This sounds familiar." Elara nodded slowly. Lena continued, "We're calling it the Guided Connection Program. It's designed to support families who form through choice, not assignment." Elara felt like the room had gone quiet around her. Myra leaned close and whispered, "That sounds like us." Elara smiled, but her eyes stung a little. The next morning, Elara's wrist tag finally chimed. Family Services response received. Her hands shook as she opened it. Status update, community family placement approved. Probationary period, 6 months. Support services assigned. Elara sat down on the edge of her bed, breath caught in her chest. Approved. It was not a permanent answer. It was not a forever promise. But it was a beginning. She went to Calder's home without thinking. The door opened and Myra nearly ran into her. "You're early," Myra said. Elara knelt and held Myra's shoulders gently. "I got a message." Calder appeared behind her. "Good or bad?" Elara looked up at him. "Good," she said. "I can stay officially for now." Myra squealed and wrapped her arms around Elara's neck. Elara hugged her back, careful and warm. Calder let out a long breath he might have been holding for months. "Thank you," he said quietly. Elara shook her head. "You don't have to thank me. This is my choice too." The probation period began with simple changes. Elara moved out of her guest room and into the spare room in Calder's home. It was small, but it had a window that looked out at the stars. Myra helped her unpack, placing each item like it was part of a puzzle. "This goes here," Myra said, pointing to the wooden star. Elara placed it on the shelf. Calder watched from the doorway, arms crossed, smiling without realizing it. They started sharing meals every day. Sometimes they cooked. Sometimes they used the food printer. Sometimes they burned things and laughed about it. Myra started calling Alara Mom Alara, not quite Mom, but close enough to make Alara's chest feel full. Calder did not correct her. Alara began working officially in the Learning Dome again, but now as part of the Guided Connection program. She helped other families learn how to build routines, how to listen, how to create spaces that felt safe instead of perfect. People started asking her for advice. How do you get children to open up? How do you make a place feel like home? Alara always answered the same way. You show up, and you keep showing up. One evening, after Myra had gone to sleep, Calder and Alara sat near the window. You've changed more than just our home, Calder said. The station feels different. Alara looked at the lights glowing in the distant corridors. I didn't do that alone, Calder shook his head. Maybe not, but you started something. Alara thought about that. Myra started something, she said. Calder smiled. That sounds like her. The 6 months passed faster than Alara expected. There were hard days, days when Myra had bad dreams, days when Calder shut down instead of talking. Days when Alara wondered if she was strong enough for this kind of life. But there were also days filled with laughter, stories, and quiet moments that felt like sunlight in the dark. On the last day of the probation period, Lena visited their home. Myra sat very straight on the couch. Calder stood near the table. Alara tried not to pace. Lena smiled at all of them. Relax, this isn't a test. Alara laughed nervously. It feels like one. Lena sat down. I've been watching your progress. The station has been watching. And I can say, honestly, this is one of the healthiest family bonds we've seen form through the program. Calder blinked. So, what happens now? Lena looked at Alara. The choice is yours. You can make this placement permanent, or you can step back. Either way, the system will support you. Alara felt the weight of the moment settle on her shoulders. She looked at Myra. Myra looked back, eyes wide and hopeful but not demanding. Alara looked at Calder. He did not try to hide what he felt. He did not try to pressure her either. He just waited. Alara took a deep breath. I choose to stay, she said. Myra jumped up and hugged her. Calder laughed, a real laugh, the kind that sounded like it had been waiting a long time to come out. Lena stood. Then I'll make it official. That night, Havenfall Station felt brighter, not because the lights changed, but because something inside its people did. Word spread about Alara's choice. About how a family had formed not through a contract, but through a question whispered by a child. Other families began asking for similar support. The Guided Connection program grew. The Interstellar Initiative took notice. Messages came in from other stations. They wanted to know how Havenfall had done it. Alara wrote back with the same simple answer every time. We listened. One evening, Alara, Calder, and Myra stood together at the wide window in the central ring. The stars stretched out in every direction, endless and quiet. Myra held both of their hands. Do you think the stars can see us? She asked. Alara smiled. I think they can feel us. Calder squeezed their hands gently. I think they're learning from us. Myra nodded seriously. Good, then they won't be lonely. Alara looked at the reflection in the glass. 3 figures standing close together. Not perfect, not planned, but real. The morning sun of Havenfall Station was not a real sun, but it felt just as warm. Light poured through the wide windows of the central ring, touching the floors, the walls, and the faces of the people who passed by. Alara walked beside Myra, holding her small hand as they made their way toward the Learning Dome. Calder followed a few steps behind, carrying a bag filled with books and simple tools. Myra skipped instead of walked, her shoes tapping softly against the floor. Today is sharing day, she said proudly. Alara smiled. And what are you sharing? Myra lifted a small, soft bundle wrapped in cloth. The star blanket you made. Alara felt a small spark of pride. The blanket had been made from old fabric pieces donated by neighbors. Every patch came from a different home, a different story. It was not perfect, but it was warm. That's a very good choice, Alara said. They entered the dome where children and parents were already gathering. The space was bright and open, filled with small tables, cushions, and drawings taped to the walls. The room felt alive in a way Alara had never felt in any school back on Earth. Myra ran to join her friends, holding the blanket like a treasure. Calder leaned closer to Alara. She's been talking about this all week, he said. Alara laughed softly. I had a feeling. As they watched Myra settle in, a group of visitors entered the dome. They wore simple but formal clothing, and their wrist tags glowed with unfamiliar symbols. Lena walked in with them, her calm smile in place. She waved when she saw Alara and Calder. "These are observers from the initiative," Lena said when she reached them. "They're here to learn." Calder raised an eyebrow. "Learn what?" Lena smiled. "How a station like this turned into a place people ask to be sent to." Alara felt a strange mix of nervousness and pride. The visitors spread out, quietly watching. They saw parents helping children build small models. They saw neighbors sharing snacks and stories. They saw people sitting together not because they had been matched, but because they wanted to be close. Myra stood up in front of her group, holding the star blanket. "This is my home," she said, pointing to the blanket. "Everyone gave a piece." One of the visitors leaned closer to Lena. "She's very confident," Lena nodded. "She learned it here." Later that day, Alara was asked to speak with the group. She stood in a small circle, feeling suddenly like the quiet teacher she had been back on Earth, her hands folded together without her noticing. "I'm not an expert," Alara said. "I didn't plan any of this." One of the visitors smiled. "That's what makes it interesting." Alara thought for a moment. "When I came here, I thought I was here to be chosen," she said. "By a system, by a program, by someone who needed help." She glanced through the window at Myra, who was laughing with another child. But what happened instead was I was invited by a child who didn't care about rules or forms. She only cared about how something felt. The visitors listened closely. "Havenfall didn't change because of a new policy," Alara continued. "It changed because people started paying attention to each other. They stopped asking, 'What do I get?' and started asking, 'Who needs me?'" The group was quiet for a moment. One of them finally said, "That's not something we can program." Alara smiled. "No, but it's something you can make space for." That evening, Havenfall Station held a small celebration. Not an official one, just a gathering in the central ring with soft music and shared food. The visitors joined in, sitting among families instead of standing apart. Myra ran from group to group, showing the blanket, showing her drawings, showing her wooden stars. At one point, she climbed onto a bench and looked around. "I'm not lonely," she announced. People laughed gently. Alara and Calder stood nearby. Calder slipped his hand into Alara's without thinking. She did not pull away. "Do you ever miss it?" Calder asked quietly. "The other future, the one you almost took." Alara thought about the message she had never answered. "The life that would have been calm and clear and distant." "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look around and I realize I didn't lose a future. I found one." Calder nodded. "I feel the same." Later that night, after the station grew quiet, Alara tucked Myra into bed. Myra held her carved star in one hand and the edge of the star blanket in the other. "Can you tell me the story again?" she asked. "The small star," Alara said. Myra nodded. Alara sat on the edge of the bed and began. "There was once a small star who thought it was too dim to matter. It lived far away from the bright ones, and it believed no one would ever see it." Myra listened, eyes half closed. "One day, a traveler got lost in the dark. The big stars were too far away to help. But the small star was close, and its light, even though it was soft, showed the traveler the way home." Myra smiled sleepily. "The small star learned something important," Alara continued. "It didn't need to shine for the whole universe. It only needed to shine for someone." Myra's eyes closed. Alara stayed for a moment, listening to her breathing, slow and peaceful. In the doorway, Calder watched. "She always sleeps during that part," he whispered. Alara smiled. "It's her favorite." They walked out together and stood by the window in the quiet living room. The stars outside were endless, cold, and beautiful. "I used to think space was lonely," Calder said. "All that empty distance." Alara shook her head. "It's only empty if no one reaches across it." A message chimed on Alara's wrist tag. This one was from the initiative. Update, HAVNFALL model to be expanded. Request for guided connection program consultation across multiple stations. Alara showed it to Calder. He let out a soft laugh. "Looks like Myra started something bigger than all of us." Alara nodded. "She just asked a question." The weeks that followed were full of visitors, messages, and quiet changes across human space. More stations began using Havenfall's model. More families formed without contracts, without pressure. Alara helped guide the process, but she never forgot where it started. With a whisper. One day, years later, Havenfall Station was no longer a small name on a star map. It became known as a place where humans and others came to learn how to build not just colonies, but communities. Myra grew taller. Her drawings became more detailed. Her questions became bigger. One afternoon, she stood at the same wide window where she once asked Alara to be her mother. "Do you think I'll go to another world someday?" Myra asked. Alara thought for a moment. "Maybe," she said. "If you do, what will you take with you?" Myra didn't hesitate. "This," she said, touching the wooden star at her neck. "And what you taught me." Alara's eyes filled, but she smiled. Calder put a hand on both of their shoulders. "What's that?" Myra looked out at the stars. "How to make a place feel like home." The three of them stood there together, reflected in the glass. Not a perfect family, not a planned one, but a real one. And far beyond Havenfall Station, across quiet stars and distant worlds, people began to learn what one small girl already knew. The universe was big.